Hello there, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of The Brief. I'm Jessy Chahal. Thanks for being with me. In this edition, I'll be speaking to Associate Professor Dr. RAZMAN Abdul, Latiff, an economist from the Putra Business School. He talks to us about the upcoming budget 2022. Now, not long to go till that budget is tabled, and a lot of points of contention and discussion as well around the budget this time around. And as usual, Nordin Abdullah joins us today with the Nordin Crisis Brief. But before that, this has just come through from the Parliament. The government say that they have yet to decide on any legal action against anti-vaccine groups in the country. The Dewan Negara was told earlier this morning. Now, Health Minister Khalid says that the ministry would instead continue efforts to educate the groups on COVID-19 vaccines. Now, he has also said that the ministry has taken the approach to restrict access to privileges to those who refuse to be vaccinated. Khairi also said that the acts of anti-vaccine groups in the country at this point only comprise a very small number of individuals, as over 95% of the Malaysian population have already been inoculated. And moving on, according to the Prime Minister, the National Disaster Risk Reduction Policy, which is being formulated by the National Disaster Management Agency, or as we know it better, NADMA, will serve to intensify the nation's disaster risk preparedness. And of course, coming through with the occurrence of the pandemic, unprecedented times, this sort of policy could not be any more important. Now, apart from improving the understanding of disaster risks, the policy will also help increase investment in disaster risk reduction initiatives in terms of human resource capacity, institutional empowerment, expansion of mitigation measures, and of course, very importantly, technology applications. Now, one of the efforts from NADMA at this point is to increase public awareness and understanding through the publication of the NRR document. Now, if you hear that, it actually stands for the National Risk Register document. This will be released by the Prime Minister next month. But we have these jargons, we have these big terms and words. How do we make sense of it? Well, it's now time to bring in Nordin for the Nordin Crisis Brief to tell us a little bit better about what all this is about. Nordin, we're hearing all these words, but break it down for us, NADMA's risk reduction initiatives and what that means.
Well, there's a lot of acronyms and a lot of abbreviations always get flown around at these type of events. But what we need to think about in terms of crisis management is what is the objective. And when we start with the objective first, we start to realize that what we want to create is a resilient society. We want to create resilient individuals and resilient corporations and organizations that are able to deal with a crisis when it hits, regardless of whether it's a flood or in recent times, we're always talking about COVID-19. But we see that NADMA, and of course we've got to thank the role of the team at NADMA, who are doing a wonderful job during this time, and often they've been, the quiet performer in COVID-19 COVID-19 response. But with this document, with this approach, we're starting to look at the objective, and then once we get the objective right, we can start to get the policies right, and then we can start to get the real investments required to build a resilient society, and that will make it possible that when something happens, that we are not wiped out. Economic activity is not wiped out. Lives are not lost, and lost time in production and lost time in education is not lost. And that's one of the things that we're starting to realize, that we need to have a broader understanding of crisis response. And NADMA is thankfully taking the lead with the support of the Prime Minister. So it's a very good step.
Right. And of course, these things can't be achieved overnight either. And that's why one of NADMA's efforts at this point is to increase awareness and understanding. What should the Malaysian public be aware of or know about at this point in terms of the NRR document?
Well, this is an interesting document that when you put it together, you start to look at the risks that are around you. So if you're in an area that is prone to flooding, you need to start to build your resilience in relation to that particular crisis. So building the capacity in the communities building the education at the school level, at university level, and at the community levels is going to be important. The other thing, Jessy, I want to bring up now is also an increased use of technology. And some of the stuff that we've seen over the last few months and during COVID-19 is the increased use of technology. And one of those key technologies that we're seeing used a lot more in crisis response and disaster response is actually drones. And that's one area within the Malaysian industry, especially the aerospace industry, that Malaysia actually has a competitive advantage. So I hope that this disaster response, the resilience, is also linked to an industry that Malaysia can excel in, so that not only can we be good at dealing with what happens here, but we can export that expertise into the region, and that could be either through expertise or, in the case of drones, through the physical drones themselves.
Right, that sounds brilliant. I mean, I can't wait to be, speaking more about this particular initiative with you in time to come as well, as we see more efforts take shape. But let's move on now to Fitch Solutions. They have a prediction, Nordin, and quite an interesting one as well.
Yes, you're going to have to fill me in a little bit more into that prediction.
Okay, well, what we know at this point is they say consumer appetite is set to rebound next year, with household spending that is expected to grow by some 5.1% after 2 years of contraction, of course, as the pandemic has hit all of us and kept us all indoors. So they say total consumer spending fell from 855 billion ringgit over 2021. So this year, 5.4% lower than the 905 billion ringgit, which was recorded, of course, in good times, as we refer to it now, pre-COVID days. So retail sales in Malaysia, of course, this year has been fairly weaker than the years past, with growth mainly coming from a low base as prolonged lockdown restrictions have impacted both consumers and retailers as well. So I guess what they to capsule what they're saying is that the consumer appetite is building back, and also now that people are back in some form of live again in terms of jobs and income, we're expected to see household spending as well to increase.
I think so, Jessy. And one of the things that I've seen in the last few days, and this is a great example, I was at a restaurant on the holiday on Tuesday, which we waited an extra almost half an hour for our food, and the reason why is because they didn't have enough staff working that day. So when the economy kicks back, when consumer spending kicks in, you're going to see a demand for labor that is also going to kick in. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for Malaysians to fill that gap where a lot of foreign workers used to work. And now this is, again, going back to this concept of building a resilient society. And for companies also to realize that they need to start sourcing their labor locally. And this will actually start to be an increased area of resilience for the country, and will reduce unemployment, and of course with that reduce the poverty rate. So this is something that we're seeing as a developing story, and something that we're seeing will grow. And with the budget coming up next week, I think this needs to be put into the planning of the government.
Right. Tracking the week gone by, and with the outlook of the 12th Malaysia plan, and then of course we've got the budget as well. What are some areas that you think are pretty exciting, or that you would like to see more updates on?
Well, for me, I'm excited to see what is happening with the economy. I think this is really the story that everyone has been waiting to see. The big area that I think that Malaysia is going to see a boost in activity is tourism. Once we get the domestic tourism equation right, we can start to think and hope about international tourism. That will bring direct cash into the economy that wasn't available earlier. And that will again start to reduce unemployment and all those positive knock-on effects. And I think that is the story that we should be tracking in the next few weeks.
Wonderful, Nordin. As usual, a pleasure to speak to you. We'll catch you tomorrow, same time, same place, on the brief with the crisis brief as well. We'll speak to you soon. Take care. That, of course, was Nordin Abdullah weighing in on some of the trending stories from Fitch Solutions right up to NATMA's risk reduction policy. Now, of course, Fitch Ratings Incorporated is an American credit rating agency, and it is one of the big three credit rating agencies, of course, the other two belonging to the Standard and Poor's and Moody's. Now, moving on from that, it has been the rainy season, and there has been many occurrences of floods and cases of emergency. And a fireman who lost consciousness during a flood rescue operation in Malacca recently has passed on. 46-year-old Muhammad Diace Juso passed away at the Malacca hospital after losing consciousness during a flood rescue operation due to strong currents. From that, let's move on to an update from the Health Ministry. And he, of course, highlighted this on Twitter in his tweet today. He says COVID now data shows that hospital admissions in Klang Valley and Sarawak have increased over the last 7 days. And so he assures that the ministry will ramp up analysis and surveillance efforts. Now, this data shows that the average number of hospital admissions over the past 7 days in Selangor, for example, has increased to 365. Now, these are numbers, of course, we don't want to see grow any higher. And so a quick reminder here that while we seem to be going back to what we know as normal, we still have to remember the new norm is still something we have to adhere to, and our SOPs. We're not out of danger yet. We don't know what this virus can do beyond what we already know. So at this point, it is still a very dangerous or versatile time. But the Finance Minister, Tengku Zafrul, says the economic sector recovery strategies will be realized through the Budget 2022. It is formulated based on the country's current scenario. Now, he says the country is currently undergoing a massive recovery period from the pandemic, which almost, of course, paralyzed the whole business ecosystem. Imagine the thick of the MCO back in March to September, October 2020, and then that trickled into 2021 as well. So this time, Budget 2022 aims to restore foreign investor confidence in the country as an investment destination. The budget will be tabled on October 29th at 4 p.m. Bernama will be carrying multiple discussions, forums, talk shows live for you so that we can all help to, break down some issues and facts and numbers. We'll be bringing in experts to the table as well for discussions. Do keep your channel locked on to Bernama TV for the budget 2022. As we look forward to the budget, we're happy to have a brighter man at this point share some light on what we can expect from the budget. Joining me is Economist from the Putra Business School, Associate Professor Dr. Ahmad RAZMAN Abdul Latiff. Prof, it's good to see you again. And of course, we always rope you in when we need to, break things down a little further. So let's look at last year's budget. That was mainly focused on the pandemic and the COVID-19 recovery. The Finance Minister this time has alluded to a budget which is based on our current scenario, as he says. What are some of the main priorities of the budget this year, Prof?
Yes, Jessy, as we are all aware, this 2022 budget will be the first budget under the 12th Malaysian Plan, and 12th Malaysian Plan is also will be the first Malaysian Plan under the Shared Prosperity Vision. So when we look into the objective of Shared Prosperity Vision, it's talking about development to all, it's talking about the equality, talking about uniting the nation and to share the prosperity. And when we look into the theme of the 12 Malaysian plans, it's all about kickstarting the economy to strengthen the security, the prosperity, inclusivity, and also to boost up the sustainability. So when I look into what's going to be the main theme for 2022, of course, is going to focus on the recovery, the economic recovery, the COVID-19 recovery, and also to kickstarting the economy again but not to forget to make sure that the people will be prosperous again. And the main theme, if you look into the 12th Malaysian Plan, also talking about the sustainability, the government commitment towards the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and this is also will be the main theme in the upcoming 2022 budget.
Okay, but in terms of recovery, as you've mentioned as well, what can we expect from the budget in terms of helping SMEs, for example, get back on their feet? Now people are, off for Cuti Malaysia, so the tourism sector, F&B, as we see, as I've noticed, in fact, pretty much everyone's back out at the malls and whining and dining, for example.
Yeah, I noticed that 2 days ago when went to shopping mall, people forming queues everywhere, and like what Nordin Abdullah just said. So this is
Right.
something that the government have to consider and prepare for the upcoming budget, meaning that can the SMEs recover swiftly enough to benefit from the rising confidence of the buyers, the people coming out to spend, to travel. What if they do not have enough workers? What if they do not have enough financing to cover the immediate operating expenses, for example? So when we look into the previous budget, we know that the wage subsidy, the financing assistance given by the financial institution already become the main features of the previous budget, as well as the fiscal stimulus packages that we have seen before. So I think this is also going to be there again, especially on the financing part. But I do hope that there's a part of this initiative that encourage the businesses or the financing institution to give loan or financing to those businesses who are willing to hiring more workers, especially the local workers who's willing to embark on digitization, on automation, because 2022 also will be the critical phase of Jendela, where we're going to upgrade the digital facilities. So all these things hopefully will be there, not just simply providing financial assistance, but ensuring that there are more workers, local workers to be hired, automation, digitalization to reduce dependency on the foreign workers, as well as perhaps the to reduce the dependency on the imported product or services. We need to make sure our supply chain is strong enough, resilient enough, especially considering that the global world is still facing the supply chain crisis.
That's right. But when you talk about automation and getting perhaps more skillful workers to adapt to technology, I can't help but think of the youth segment, and that too being a big topic this year, especially with Undi 18 Prof. The Student Congress of IIUM, along with a few other student bodies, they will be presenting their student proposal for the budget to the finance minister come October 29. How much will youth influence this year's budget?
I think it's going to be a big influence, considering that most likely we're going also to have a general election by next year, and with the influx of I think few millions of young voters. So this probably should be the main focus in the upcoming budget. And we know the main problem facing the youth right now, especially those who just graduated from the universities, is the unemployment. We still have high unemployment rate, 4.6%, more than 720,000 still unemployed. I think around 200,000 actually youth who just graduated, and this is going to be the main issue or demand for the youth to be able to get not just job but high paying enough. So because we understand last year we experienced a drop in the average salaries, so the youth want something that equivalent to their talent, and this is something that I think will be the main focus of the budget.
Prof, without much time left on the clock, for those who are tuning in, perhaps they are not quite familiar with economics as a whole, what are some basics that we should take note of or perhaps know about our economy at this point?
Well, our economy is actually very resilient. The reason why we are facing contraction, not because we do not have enough supplies or demand, but because of the restriction in the movement, also as the closing of sectors. But once all the sectors open, people can now start to spend, businesses can now start to flourish. So the key word here, we are now in the recovery phase. The optimism is there. Major indicators of economic indicators have also shown positive increment. So what we want to see now is actually the execution of government policy initiative under the upcoming budget, and the people only need to make sure we follow the SOP, the physical distancing, so that we will not be subjected to what we have experienced for the past 1.5 years.
Absolutely. Thank you, Prof, for weighing in and sharing your views and perspectives on the upcoming budget 2022. We'll speak to you again. That was Associate Professor Dr. Ahmad Razman Abdul Latiff from the Putra Business School weighing in on all matters the budget. Well, that, of course, is happening in just about 8 days' time, and a lot of conversation around the budget 2022. We'll be having multiple discussions as well on the channel, so be sure to tune in to hear some subject matter experts speak and share their views as well. Now, the Menteri Besar of Negeri Sembilan, Datuk Seri Aminuddin Harun, has said that the State Legislative Assembly sitting is scheduled to be held on November 26th. He says the state government is expected to table 4 bills during this sitting, which includes the implementation of Undi 18 and limiting the term of office to MBs for 2 terms. He's added that a Deepavali Carnival will be held from October 25th until November 3rd in Seremban, Tampin and Kemenchik. Now, on the topic of vaccination, Aminuddin announced that 100.7% of the adult population in the state is now fully vaccinated and 100.3% have received their first dose. This percentage is inclusive of foreigners in the state and does not mean that the entire adult population is fully vaccinated at this point. And as we move on, more updates for you. Now, according to the Ministry of Health, as of yesterday, 94.2% of the adult population in the country have completed their COVID-19 vaccination. That figure is about 22 million individuals plus. As for teenagers aged between 12 to 17, 38.7% of them have had their vaccinations completed. And here's a quick look at some news in brief. Former Election Commission Deputy Chairman Datuk Seri Wan Ahmad Wan Omar says political parties have been advised to keep their campaign subdued in the Malacca state election. For instance, house-to-house visits should not be allowed. Otherwise, he says, this election could lead to a host of unforeseen problems. What we know at this point, the Malacca government will go to the polls on November 20th to seek a new mandate after 4 of its assemblymen withdrew their support for incumbent Chief Minister Datuk Seri Sulaiman Muhammad Ali earlier this month as well. And with the state Malacca elections, the different areas in Malacca, in terms of the constitutions, will live in countries close to Malaysia's borders are now allowed to register as postal voters after a law prohibiting this was rescinded by the Election Commission. Similarly, Malacca's, those representatives living abroad who have visited Malaysia for 30 days in the last 5 years will also be allowed to vote through mail. So as you can see, a lot of SOPs being placed here to ensure that the state election remains restricted to as much as possible or as far as it can go. Previously, what happened was Malaysians living in southern Thailand, Singapore, Brunei, and Indonesia were not allowed to cast postal votes as well. Bringing you the latest now on what's happening internationally. We've got quite a bit of stories for you, but here, there's a new truth in town, courtesy of Donald Trump. The former US President Donald Trump says he will launch his own social media called Truth Social. He says that he would stand up to big tech companies such as Twitter and Facebook that have barred him from their platforms. The social network, which is set for beta launch as early as next month, is the first of 3 stages in the company's plans. It will be followed by a subscription video on demand service called TMTG Plus. That's interesting indeed. And Britain and New Zealand have reached an agreement in principle on a free trade deal designed to reduce tariffs, improve service trade, and take London one step closer to membership of a broader Trans-Pacific trade agreement. Now, Prime Ministers Boris Johnson and Jacinda Ardern sealed a deal just yesterday after 16 months of being in negotiation. And this comes only months after a similar British agreement was signed with Australia, as London looks to engineer a post-Brexit pivot away from relying on the European Union. Speaking of the EU, European lawmakers called for an ambitious outcome to November's COP26 climate summit. Parliament is set to vote on the EU stance on Thursday as it heads towards the summit, which is being lauded by climate campaigners as crucial to control climate change. And moving on to Argentina, the mandatory use of face masks at outdoor areas and areas with no crowds was in fact lifted yesterday. However, on the first day of the relaxation, many Argentines were seen in the streets still wearing face masks. Many locals are left pondering on whether they will continue to wear masks or not. But for us, at this point, it is still very mandatory for us to wear our face mask. In fact, it's been recommended that we double mask as we go out. All right, and that takes me up to what's trending on Twitter. We've got a couple of things going on there. Hashtag Demi Malaysia is trending on Twitter as results of the first round matches are coming in for the Denmark Open 2021 badminton competition. Praise is also coming in for national men's singles player Li Zijia after his winning performance just yesterday. People are also turning their attention to football as Manchester United defeated Atlanta in the Champions League match with Ronaldo scoring a winning goal. And to developments in the tech world, the new and improved version of Android 12 is being released today with new features like a new style for widgets and an increased amount of animation. Android users to celebrate, of course, after the recent announcement of what Apple has been doing and how they have updated their features as well. Well, that's all for today's edition of The Brief. I'm Jessy Chahal. Thanks for watching.